Hey chat, I was recently lucky enough to be invited to Diary of a CEO's podcast on meaning and purpose. And it was great. It was awesome. I was with two philosophers, and I had a lot to say about meaning and purpose, but I ran into a couple of problems. I was with a Christian and an atheist, which means they got into a discussion about things that I thought weren't super relevant to meaning or purpose.
That God is in the process of solving the problem of evil over time.
The explanation for why the evil's there in the first place. You said the fall.
The second is that I was with a group of philosophers, and following what they said was actually kind of hard for me. I'm not really a philosopher.
So how is it that this mystery of consciousness, which contains propositional thoughts, ideas, and purposes, if consciousness can't be explained the Darwinian way, how can some characterization of molecules in motion accomplish that same end? That's my concern.
So what I wanted to do today is justify some of the claims that I made and lay out my general hypothesis that there is an evidence-based approach to finding meaning and purpose in your life.
So for me, finding meaning and purpose is like a very practical thing.
So the first thing we have to understand about purpose is, how do you know you have purpose or don't have purpose in life? So this, I know it sounds kind of weird, but purpose, a sense of purpose or meaning in your life, is something that is internally felt. Okay, this is the first thing to understand. So if I go to you and I ask, hey, do you have meaning or purpose in life? You are going to say yes or no or maybe, but the data that you're using is going to be internal. It doesn't necessarily mean, like, I've met so many people who have careers, have families, have kids, and yet they feel like they don't have purpose. And I've met other people who don't have careers, don't have family, even people who are homeless or in jail, who feel like they have purpose in life. So the first thing to understand is, from a scientific perspective, purpose is something that is internally felt. It is not directly correlated to something external in your life, like how much money you make, whether you get laid, etc. Okay? Second thing that's really confusing, purpose is something that is quantifiable. So if I were to ask you, do you have purpose in life? You may say yes, you may say no, but the majority of people out there will say something besides yes or no. They'll say, like, yeah, I feel like I've got some purpose over here, but it's not like 100%, which kind of makes sense, right? That's what everyone sort of feels. And so this is what's really interesting. Purpose is something that is quantifiable. So we can measure the percentage of purpose in your life, okay? So third thing that I'm going to say, purpose is not something that you find, because the way that we talk about purpose, we're like, yeah, I found my purpose in life. We make it seem binary, which it's not. And we also make it seem like it is something that comes from outside of us. Like, I'm walking down the street, I try this thing, and then I try this thing, and then I go to this place, and I go to this place. And if I try hard enough, if I look hard enough, if I watch enough YouTube videos, I will find my purpose. That's not how it happens. Purpose is internally crafted through a series of actions, okay? What are those actions? This is where the first thing that we're going to go into is something called self-determination theory. So this is a theory that was developed that basically talks about how people get a sense of purpose and direction in life. It's a theory that's maybe 30 years old, maybe longer, and there's been a ton of research into it where people have basically figured out, if you take a group of people who feel like they have purpose in life, what do they do that evokes that internal feeling of, yes, I have direction? And then if we take people who do not have purpose and direction in life, what is their life like? And here's what self-determination theory shows us. The first is that people who have a sense of purpose make choices. People who don't have a sense of purpose have choices made to them. So people who make choices in life have a sense of direction, have a sense of meaning. And does this kind of make sense that if we look at kind of the Venn diagram of meaning in life, purpose in life, direction in life, those are going to overlap a fair bit, which is part of what the research tells us, right? So if I ask someone, hey, do you have meaning in life? If they say yes, if I ask them another question, do you have direction in life? They will probably also say yes. So what this sort of means is that these three concepts, meaning, purpose, and direction, all relate to one thing that we feel within us. So then the question becomes, how do we evoke that thing? The first thing is making choices. And so this is what's really crazy, is that a lot of times when people lack purpose, they have this kind of thought, which is, which choice should I make? What is the right choice or the wrong choice? But I want you all to really think about this for a second, okay? So if I'm thinking about what is the right choice versus the wrong choice, I am not making the choice. What makes a choice right or wrong? usually what the world tells me. Should I study this or should I study this? Well, this one will get you a better job with more money. This one will get you a worse job with less money. So who is really making that decision? It sort of feels like ultimately you will choose the thing, but which thing you choose is not determined by you, right? You're making the choice based on what the rest of the world is going to offer you. So one of the huge problems that people who feel directionless or lack meaning in their life, one of the main reasons that they struggle is because they are constantly looking to the outside world to tell them what the right answer is. So what self-determination theory tells us is that if you start to make choices, it doesn't matter what choice you make, but you make a choice for yourself. It can be something as simple as, I'm going to drink this, or I'm going to drink this. I'm going to go for a hike because I feel like it. I'm going to read this book because I'm excited about it. This is where we're not focused on the external value of our actions, but we are going to exercise some self-control in terms of like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to make my life the way that I want it. Now, when you start to make those choices, something really cool happens. Your internal sense of control, direction, and purpose in life will increase. The second aspect of self-determination theory is stretching your capacity. So if we look at someone who feels meaningless in life, doesn't have any meaning, what they're usually doing is trying to play life with minimum effort. They're playing this very like efficiency-oriented life where like, I'm going to work as little as I can to not get fired. I'm going to work as little as I can to get promoted. There's a capitalist system and everyone is milking me. I want my life to be simple so that I can be lazy and spend my whole time watching self-help videos on the internet, right? This is how we live life because we feel so burnt out. We feel so despairing. We feel like things aren't going well. And so we don't usually push ourselves. What we find from self-determination theory is that people who have a sense of meaning and purpose in life stretch their capacities. So I have this idea of what I'm capable of. And if I live within the frame of my capabilities, then who I am and what I'm capable of never changes, right? If I never commit to trying something beyond what I'm capable of, if I always play it safe and play it easy, my confidence in myself will never improve. Whereas when I stretch my capacities, when I try to do something that I don't think I'm capable of, or I'm not sure I'm capable of, that does a couple of really amazing things internally and psychologically. So keep in mind, we're not focused on what happens externally, whether you win or you lose or whatever. So when you stretch your capacities, even if you fail, you are still leveling up, right? So if I go to the gym, where does the growth happen? If I lift light weights and never stress myself, what actually happens to my muscle tissue? It's not going to tear, it's not going to be stressed, and I won't get muscular hypertrophy. We know this from a stance of muscular growth, right? You have to push yourself in order to get stronger. And it turns out that our sense of self-esteem is exactly the same way. So if we stretch our capacities, so for example, if you say like, okay, I want to work out once a week because that's what I'm capable of. If you stretch yourself and you say, okay, let's shoot for 2 times a week. If you say, okay, I need to wake up at 7 a.m., but let me try to wake up at 6:30. This is the really interesting thing. The action that you take is not what's important. What self-determination theory tells us is whatever you are capable of, push yourself a little bit more. Now, when you push yourself, a couple of cool things happen because sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. Even if you lose, if you handle it in kind of the right way, and this is where things get tricky because sometimes this can trigger like rumination and thought spirals and, oh my God, I should have never tried in the first place. That's for a different day. But most of the time what happens is sometimes even if you fail, you're like, man, like at least I tried, right? I'm not someone who's living life on the sidelines. I gave it a shot. I took control of my life. I lived with some direction. I made an attempt. And actually what's really cool is that most of the time we'll find that we actually did a little bit better than we expected. So if we stretch our capacities, it will increase our internal sense of direction, meaning, and purpose. The third thing that we're going to talk about is relatedness. So relatedness is actually the really hard one because relatedness is the one thing that you can't do on your own. The first two you can do on your own. But what we know is that human beings are communal creatures. And a sense of meaning, purpose, and direction involves being your authentic self. And once you are your authentic self, having someone recognize that, see that, and respond to that. Now, in today's world where there's, people are ghosting each other, people are very replaceable. Like we have AI applications and AI, job review by like HR at a company. Like it's hard to be seen in today's world. So this related piece is really, really difficult. So that's something that we have a bunch of stuff on the channel about socializing and connecting with people and being your authentic self. That is a third component that I think it's hard for you to sort of do on your own sitting at home. Okay. The fourth thing that we're going to talk about moves beyond self-determination theory, draws on another set of science. And that's what's so cool about this is it's not just one theory. We have a lot of different information. So basically, if you look at people who have purpose, they feel in control, right? So what that means is people who don't have purpose feel out of control. Now we're going to talk a little bit about how the brain perceives whether you are in control of your life or out of control in your life. And this is where we talk about something called passive challenges and active challenges. So a passive challenge is a challenge that you have to deal with that you did not choose. And what most people's experience of life is that there's a ton of passive challenges. I've got this stuff going on at work. I didn't want to do this. This person actually dumped me recently. Now I have to figure out where I'm going to be living because I have to move out. I have to pay taxes. My toilet got clogged. So as you go through life, if you feel like you lack meaning or purpose, basically what's happening is life is happening to you. You are not living life. Life is just coming at you from all directions and you feel overwhelmed. The research on active and passive challenges actually comes from really feeling overwhelmed and the research on anxiety, okay? Now, here's the important thing to understand. An active challenge is something that is difficult that you choose to do. So I'm going to run a marathon. Even I'm going to clean my sink every single day before I go to bed. It is something that you choose to take on that is difficult. Now, here's the really counterintuitive thing. Our sense of control in life is not based on the total number of challenges that we face, right? If life is happening to you, the last thing that you feel like doing, if everything is falling apart around you, the last thing that you feel like doing is taking on an additional challenge. What most of us want to do is we want life to leave us alone. I'm going to ghost this person. I'm going to peace out of this job. I'm going to just sit at home. I want life to stop throwing stuff my way, right? We want to reduce the number of passive challenges. But our sense of control is a very simple ratio of active challenges to passive challenges. It's not the absolute number of things that you're dealing with. It is the ratio of things that you choose to things that you don't choose. And this is where people get really tripped up, because if I have 4 things that I don't want to deal with, I think the way to gain control of my life is to get rid of 2 of them, right? And that means that basically like the passive challenges have been cut in half. Now I have more control, but that's not actually, the whole problem is that you can't really control that because life doesn't stop happening. Even if you stop trying to live life, stuff piles up, right? If you quit your job because you don't want to deal with your boss, now you're dipping into savings. Now you're going to have to polish up your resume. Now you have a gap in your resume. Now you have to go look for a job. So every time we try to retreat from the passive challenges in life, we tend to create more passive challenges for us down the road. And then this feels overwhelming because I was dealing with 4 things, I reduced 2 of them. Now I'm dealing with 6 things, I reduced 2 of them. Now I'm dealing with 8 things. And so life keeps piling up. If you listen to people who got their shit together, myself included, you can take a look at basically anyone. Like listen to any interview where someone got their shit together. And what you will notice is that there is a point in their life where they chose to take on more, okay? So when life is coming at you, you look at your life, you say, everything is falling apart. All right, I'm gonna start going to the gym every day. I'm gonna start lifting every day. I'm gonna read 1 hour of like some kind of meditative book or self-help book or read about stoicism. I'm gonna take control of my life. That is taking on an active challenge. And the cool thing is that this is the part that you control. You don't control what life does to you. This has a cascading effect because if I have 4 passive challenges, and let's say there's one thing that I'm doing, but I say, okay, I'm going to start going to the gym today. I'm going to start meditating every single day. These are things that I am choosing to take on. Suddenly, this ratio is now better. And if the ratio is better, my perception of control, because this is just how the brain makes calculations, it doesn't care about the absolute level of control. It cares about the number of things that you choose to do compared to the number of things that happen to you. This gives you a greater sense of control. Once you have a greater sense of control, you become less pessimistic, you feel more empowered. And then here's the really cool thing. Once your brain feels confident and empowered, it is way easier to actually deal with the passive challenges. And this is basically how someone gets their life together, right? So I was failing out of college, joined a fraternity, trying to date people and not really working, not fucking at all, right? And then like I got my shit together. I started taking on more stuff. I was like, I'm gonna become a monk. I'm gonna travel to India. I'm gonna do this really hard meditation practice. I'm gonna do all these, like I'm gonna get my shit together. I'm gonna try to go to medical school. That's a goal that I'm taking on. I don't care if I fail 40 rejections, 80 rejections, 3 years in a row, like doesn't really matter. This is what I'm gonna do. This is literally how you take control. We'll flip a switch in your brain. Next thing that we're gonna talk about. So when I showed up on the internet about 6 years ago and started live streaming, I noticed that people struggled with all of this stuff. People felt directionless. People felt like they had no control in life. You know, they had no meaning. They had no purpose. They struggled a lot with addictions. So I started out focusing on a video game addiction. And what we find is that basically a core vulnerability of all addictions is a lack of purpose and meaning in life. If you have no reason, no really good reason to deal with the withdrawal of a heroin addiction or get your ass out of bed and actually not jerk off, right? You have to have like a reason. You have to have something in life that pulls you away from dopaminergic and hedonistic activities. So that was my goal, is like, I'm trying to help people, you know, who have all of these new age problems. So these are technology addictions, amotivation, I don't feel like doing anything, burnout, imposter syndrome. There's all this stuff that people are dealing with. So I showed up on the internet and I did a bunch of research, right? So I read a bunch of things and I tried to figure out, okay, how do I help these people? So a big part of what we do on this channel is teach these principles, and we're going to teach y'all a couple of practical things that you can do. But this is also literally why I developed a coaching program. So what I did is I looked at all of these problems and then I thought, okay, how do I help these people? And there's a certain amount of watching stuff on the internet that helps people, but I'm a psychiatrist. What I've seen is that when patients come into my office and I work with them in a dedicated way, they get better. And as I started teaching, right, these principles, what I found was that people ran into problems. So most common problem is they're conflicted. So yeah, I do want to meditate every day, but I don't feel like it. I do want to go to the gym. I want to stretch my capacities, but I feel embarrassed. Second thing that we ran into related to this is that they have a lot of emotional blocks, right? So like I can say, stretch your capacities and make choices. Start to take on active challenges. Take on more, set boundaries, set limits if they fall. Oh my God, just be your best self. But when human beings try to implement what someone on the internet tells them to do, they run into their internal environment. They run into anxiety, they run into depression, they run into difficulty getting out of bed. So there's like this emotional problem that like gets in the way, right? So I'm really, really lonely, but when I go hang out with people, I'm socially anxious and then I feel like leaving. So like, how do I fix this problem? Okay. So they're conflicted and they run into emotional difficulties. And then the third thing that tends to happen is that their ability to frame goals and follow through with goals is really problematic. And the reason for this is that sometimes we'll develop goals based on how we feel in the moment. Like, so I remember when I was failing out of college, I was like, in the first 2 weeks of a class, if I wasn't sure I was going to get an A, I would just drop the class, right? Because I got an F. The only way to compensate is to get an A. But if I got an F, getting an A is like really hard. So how do I move from an F to an A? So this is what's really interesting is what I need to do, right? So the real way to do it is like, I need to go from an F to a C and then a C to a B and then a B to an A. That's like literally how progress happens. But we formulate all of these goals from the wrong places. And if we formulate them from the wrong places, we end up lacking the follow through to actually achieve them. And that just digs us in the pit even more. So I was looking at all these problems, looking at video game addiction, and I was like, okay, so videos on the internet are not sufficient. Do they help people? Absolutely. But can I teach human beings, how to help other human beings with these things? Can I develop a program where someone helps someone else make a choice, help someone stretch their capacities, work through their internal resistance? A big part of our program is something called motivational interviewing, which is overcoming your internal resistance to take action. And that's what we wanted to build. And what we found in our pilot study of 1,453 clients is that we were able to increase a sense of purpose by 68% in 20 weeks. And the reason it's effective is because watching videos only gets you so far. So if you want to DIY it, we're going to give you 2 solutions in just a second. But if you want someone to help you take the actions that you need to take, then check out the program, okay? What we're going to do is teach y'all 2 techniques now to help you find purpose. Now, this comes from Viktor Frankl. So Frankl, really fascinating guy, was a neurologist who then became a psychologist, was a Holocaust survivor, and was really focused on finding meaning and purpose. He was in these concentration camps and was struggling to figure out, how to find meaning and purpose and survive and all this kind of stuff. So he developed 2 really cool techniques. So what he noticed when he worked with people is that the first thing that they need to do is something called dereflection. So dereflection is a technique where if you look at your life, you tend to be hyper-focused on you. This is something called hyper-reflection, where everything is about you. Your boss is firing you because you're a bad person. This person is breaking up with you because you're a bad person. Everything is about you. The really interesting thing is that he discovered that if we get human beings to take a step back and think a little bit less about themselves and everything that is happening to them. Oh my God, I'm in the concentration camp and the guards are smacking me around every day. I'm hungry every day. Everything in my life is terrible, 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 terrible. This is what's so interesting, not easy to do. So what he discovered is that if I can get people to take a step back, don't focus so much on yourself. Look at the big picture. This was one of the ways that you help people find a sense of meaning and purpose in life. You start to see your life, these individual experiences, as part of a broader arc, right? This is a difficult time in my life. I'm really struggling right now, but I will come out of it. I will level up from it. This will make me stronger in the end. So what Frankl found is that if you can get people to zoom out of these individual experiences and start to look at the narrative of their life, look at the big picture, that they started to find more meaning and purpose. And a good example of this is if you've ever had a friend or if you've been dumped, right? They'll look at the life and they'll be like, oh my God, my life is over. The only person that I can ever love. I had all these dreams and hopes and I was going to do this and I was going to do this and we were going to get married and we were going to have kids. And now that life is over. Everything is over in my life, over in my life, over in my life. They're so hyper-reflected. They are focused on themselves so much. And what is the process of healing that, coming out of that? It's to take a step back. Hey, there's other fish in the sea. Now you have some relationship experience. Was it painful? Yes. Was it sad? Yes. Does it suck? Yes. But you have a lot of work to do. You need to start stretching your capacities, go to the gym more, start taking care of yourself, develop a life that is worth living, start to live an independent life. So as we engage in dereflection, as we zoom out of our life, we start to find meaning and purpose. The second thing that he discovered was something called paradoxical intention. Now, this is what's really interesting. Basically, paradoxical intention is starting to look forward to the things that you dread. Okay? So weird, because there are things that we dread in life, right? Oh, I don't want to have this performance review with my boss. They put me on a performance improvement plan. I'm terrified of it. I'm dodging these phone calls from my mom asking me when I'm going to get married because I'm really struggling. We try to dodge a lot of things in life. And what Frankl noticed is that when we try to avoid things in life, the reason we're avoiding them is because we're afraid of a particular outcome. Here's the key thing he noticed. When you avoid a problem in life, the thing that you fear is more likely to happen. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? So if I'm worried about the performance improvement plan and I'm avoiding that and I'm not going to work and really trying to learn things and make everything like better and really trying to shore up where my weak points are, the likelihood that I will get terminated is actually way higher. So this is what he discovered, is that he started teaching his patients to look forward to the things that they were afraid of. So the way that I did this, and this is what's so interesting, is when I was studying in India, we sort of have this technique too, but we called it something else. So in my case, right, it was okay, these are negative karmas that I have to work through. I have all this negative karma. attached to my soul or whatever the fuck. Who knows if any of that stuff is real. But when bad stuff happens to me, this is my negative karma that I'm getting rid of. This is something that I have to work through. This is the tunnel that I'm stuck in, and I have to get to the light at the end of the tunnel. But this is a temporary thing. Stop avoiding the problems in life. This is something that I have to work through to get to the other side. That's the way that I learned it. That's the way that I internalized it. I teach that sometimes here or there. The key thing here is to look forward to the things that you're dreading. It's not just about just doing it. It is changing your mental attitude towards things that you dread. This is something that you have to do. If you go through this performance improvement plan, you will get better. You are leveling up. This is you learning how to take control of your anxiety. This is you taking control of your life instead of avoiding the thing that you are dreading. Because remember, Frankl was all about trying to help people find meaning and purpose in life. And one of the key things he discovered was paradoxical intention. Hey y'all, hope you enjoyed today's video. We talk about a bunch of topics like this on the channel, so be sure to subscribe for more. If you're already subscribed, GG, and we'll see you in chat.